So it's not the majority of Bengali women who are doing this. It's a minority, but that minority is growing and it's becoming louder and it's becoming more prevalent, especially on social media and in society. And there's a lot of Bengali women who are getting married to white or European men, like Bengali white, Bengali Pakistani, Bengali German, Bengali Spanish, Bengali Italian, etc. And mostly it's the women that are doing this. Now, why they don't like the Bengali men is kind of the same reasons why black women don't like black men. They feel like Bengali men owe them something, but they don't owe them a smile, to put it lightly. Again, that's a minority, but it is growing. It is becoming bigger and bigger. So, as I said, these are happening in my culture as well. It's already happened in the black culture, and we just need to heed the black culture as a warning. The problems that you guys are going through, not to happen to us.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. You know who it ain't and who it is. And out of respect of Go Black to Africa, I'm not going to say it the way I usually do, but still the blackest hearted, blackest minded, blackest man on social media, signing black in and shining again, asking you to hit the mother cuss word share button because the message is more important than the messenger. So my man sent that to me, and I'm going to point out, especially in the context of this, of what we're dealing with here, with this grudge in between Mr. Samuels and Dr. Brother Omar Ifatunde Johnson, that don't anyone say, and this is not really so much for Mr. Samuels, but don't anyone who has pro-black leanings in here say that we're the only ones who deal with what we're dealing with at all. We may be the only ones to deal with the exact combination of what we're dealing with, but if you want to talk exact combinations, that's true for anyone. I don't want us to underestimate the commonalities between us and some other people of what we're facing. I don't want us to overestimate them either, but the thing is we don't do that. We aren't overestimating these commonalities, we're underestimating them. So let's go ahead and look at some of the commonalities. He just said that in the Bengali community, the women may try to get mixed Bengalis, but they're not trying to get with unmixed Bengalis, and they feel that they're owed everything and they owe nothing in exchange. And he said that these are things that could have been avoided if they were willing to look at the black community as a warning and heed the warning. And I would certainly agree 100%. If you would merely, if people would merely look at the mistakes of somebody else and the successes, they would learn. We have a problem in which we don't really want to take a look at the mistakes or the suffering of others because we want to act like we're the only ones to go through what we're going through. And I've said many times before, now I'm giving you an inside testimony from another community. I've said many times before that other people have their dysfunctions, and they have dysfunctions they hide from us, and they hide them from even white folk because they're all trying to show that they're okay, that they're fine. If you don't believe me, why do you think that the emir of the Dubai, or the province that Dubai sits in, builds those tall buildings? Now, he's not the only one building them, but you have to stop and ask why it is that he gives the approval. Why do these companies keep on trying to do this? Because these buildings are owned by Emiratis and other Gulf Arabs. Why are they trying to do this? They compete in the construction of tall buildings, and they're the descendants of Bedouins that used to wander from place to place. Why do they continue to why do they even start? Because they want to show off. They want to show that they're not a bunch of backwards Bedouins from generations ago. Arabs are very sensitive about their image, but they're sensitive about how white people view them. They're not sensitive about how they're viewed in the rest of Africa. That doesn't bother them. As Africa is waking up and saying, well, down with the Arabs, and maybe even exaggerating that response, but at least having it, they don't care. They don't even know about it. I had to tell a friend of mine in Saudi that when he visited Ghana, he was not able to easily recruit this lady to be a maid for his family back in Saudi because black folk don't really trust Arabs like that no more. And she's not that desperate. And he was like, wait, why don't Africans trust us? I said, well, if I tell y'all, don't call us slaves, are y'all gonna stop as soon as y'all hear me say it? No, well, that's why, that's part of it. Now, granted, her experience in Ghana was with working for Lebanese families that lived in Ghana, but nonetheless, what they know is these are Arabs. So they don't care about how everybody views them. They care about how white folks view them. And they're not fully aware of this. You got to point it out to them. Then they would say, oh, wow, yeah, that's true. Well, the point is they still got issues. The point is that they still have, still to this day, they have that. But they got issues. I mean, they're not necessarily the best educated people on the planet, especially the Gulf Arab. Now, the non-Gulf Arabs vary in education, but the Gulf Arabs are not the most educated people on the planet. Not at all. They don't value education, they value degrees. They value salaries, not actual education. They value connections and the hookup. Does that sound familiar? So what's going on is something that is going on with other communities. And part of it is because they are being pushed. But you got to understand that the reason why they were ever targeted for such campaigns from the very beginning is because these same people were successful. The ones who were targeting them already targeted us, and they were successful. They succeeded. They won. They got what they were looking for. You have to understand something. If we had not reached a point of no return, or at least what our oppressors identify as a point of no return, nobody would have ever targeted these communities with the same thing. Now here they are targeted. If they're targeted, well, somebody figured that there was a high chance of success, or rather the community's failure and our oppressors' success. There are reasons to be pro-black. But this idea that we're the only ones that are going to have to face what we face is not one of them. That's not one of the reasons. There are reasons to be pro-black. But thinking that we're the only ones to ever go through anything, to ever be targeted for anything, is not one of them. We are oftentimes the first, and that can be the reason why we think we're the only ones. But looking at what's going on in other cultures and communities is not a bad thing, and it is not something I do because I hate being black. It is something I do because I learn about our enemies. And you can learn about your enemy when you sit down and listen to other victims tell their story. It's that simple. Now, we do have a Kevin Samuels, and we have an Umar Johnson in the argument. They didn't even have to, because Kevin wasn't trying to start a beef when he did his impersonation of how Umar talks. He was telling the ladies, you want me to talk like this? Does that even sound authentic? I'm Kevin, and he's Dr. Umar. He said, and I got no beef with him, a quarrel. Everybody has the hustle. He said this. But when he impersonated anyone else in his way of speaking, you knew right off the bat that's not him. And also the way that Dr. Umar speaks is more aggressive. Even if he's not chiding you, the way he speaks, he raises his voice. And so, yeah, it's going to sound more aggressive. Well, I mean, they were still sitting up and saying they wanted Kevin to talk like that. because he can be aggressive. Dr. Brother Omar Ifatunde can be aggressive, but then he's aggressively praising the sisters. The Queen, Mother Earth, Goddess, Cocoa, Shea Butter. He'll do that when he's aggressively doing that. Sisters want to hear that. Kevin's not raising his voice in many cases. What he'll do is he'll say, okay, we're done. You ain't gonna overtalk me. Okay, you're gonna keep trying, we're done. And shout out to Crank Lucas for that impersonation. That was actually pretty good. Let me tell you all something else too. Last night, a little bit after we broke fast, I sat down with my friend, and he may be listening to this now. In a few hours, he's going to land in, in a few hours, he's going to land in his home country. He's from the United Kingdom. He's going to land in London. This gentleman walked in 3 weeks ago. Tomorrow will make it 3 weeks ago. He walked in to my neighbor's place when we were all meeting to break the fast. And he said, yo, Black, have you heard of someone named Kevin Samuels from your country? Because I'm an American, right? Kevin's American. I said, yes, actually I have. He started to tell me what he had learned, a little bit of what he'd learned from Kevin. This man didn't know anything about RP. He found out about the RP, the red pill, from Kevin. Kevin took it mainstream. I have said our support must be conditional, but we give credit to him for the fact that he was able to put it in a way that it went mainstream. Maybe it was an accident, but he continued in the same vein, but he made it go mainstream. And even before that, he was right, because he stopped going in on dudes and started going in on these ladies. And he let them tell on themselves before he started doing it. I'm not saying that we have to forgive, and I'm not saying to the gentleman in Houston that he has to forgive Mr. Samuels for that botched consultation that Mr. Samuels did, according to the side of the story of the gentleman from Houston. We don't have to overlook that, and he's not required to forgive this. This is part of why I say that our support for Mr. Samuels needs to be conditional. Years ago, I believed in Dr. Omar's vision, or what he spoke of. I didn't know whether to believe in him personally or not, because he was new to me. I didn't know whether I should take seriously what he was saying. I didn't know how serious to consider him. But then I realized that he was not serious about Islam either, but he was claiming to be a Muslim, and this is 2012 back then. So we fast forward up until now when he's not Muslim, and he's even crediting Mama Oshun and I forgot who else for the sun coming out. Mama Oshun is here. Mama Oshun is here. Bruh, Mama Oshun was probably a human being that lived a long time ago and was later on taken as an object of worship. More than likely, whoever Mama Oshun was when she was a living person, she probably never said, I'm a god or a goddess, and asked to be worshipped. But cocoa and shea butter and all that stuff. There are other ways to defy the white man. So, I would have said back then that our support for Dr. Brother Omar Ifatunde Johnson would have also had to be conditional back then. I say support everybody conditionally, and I've told you all that goes even for me. If you're someone who believes in me, believe in me conditionally. When I stop making sense, it's okay to say, well, I just don't understand what he's talking about. But when I start getting illogical, it's okay to withdraw your support. You may have to. I'm human. I could lose my mind. I could get a head injury, but still remember how to record and upload stuff, and I'm not making sense. Hell, I could get distracted by the phone ringing and say something nonsensical without even meaning any harm. Do you understand? Support for anybody's conditional. But one of the reasons that you have to stop supporting someone is when they start saying only black folks, and then they list several things that other groups of people are going through as well. And there are certain things that are unique to us, certain things that are unique to anybody. But things that we thought were unique to us and may have been at one point, these things that we thought were unique to us are now turning out to be the same thing with others. And in all honesty, I mean, we got even Massa talking about this. Massa's complaining about Miss Ann and how she's treating him. You owe me the world and I don't owe you a smile. Kind of one-sided mess is that? Well, that's going on even amongst them too. That's not just going on amongst us, even amongst Massa. And understand, when these women start talking like that, these women are going to start saying to their men, if they haven't already started saying it, you Bengali men here in the UK, here in London, owe us protection and provision. Our lives matter. But we don't owe you anything, even a smile. That's how they're going to start talking. I probably got a terrible British accent, but that's how they're going to start talking if they have not done so already. Because he said they already feel that they're owed the world. I'm sure the protection comes with that. They feel that they are owed the world. And protection must be a part of it. Protection and provision. And procreation, but only the way they want. And so I'm looking at, I listened to this message. And I waited a few days. And then I met up with my friend who's also from the same country. But these two gentlemen are from different cities. The one whose voice you heard and the friend with whom I met yesterday are from two different cities. Now, they know each other. They've met before. And they may have even hung out. And I'm going to tell you this. What I learned yesterday was that even in the Somali community in the UK, they're going through something similar. And that the women are beginning to say, we don't want Somali men. Now, the difference is that the women are saying they don't want Somali men, but they're not necessarily looking for white men. That's where the difference comes in there. They're still looking for black men, usually black Muslim men, usually. They're still looking for that, usually. Iman marrying David Bowie was an anomaly. Most of even the feminists from the Somali community in the UK did not say that that was okay. More so because of his religion than because of his race, but most of them did not say that that was okay. However, I want you to stop and think about what the hell that means. Because some of us like to say, well, if you ain't ADOS, you don't know what we're talking about. No, if they're not ADOS, they may not know every single detail of what we're talking about, but they're probably going through something similar. And the only way we're going to find out is if we're willing to listen. And I got to give a shout out to Edward Anderson because he's willing to try to find out what the differences and similarities are between what us and others are going through. He's very clear about who's ADOS and who's not, but he's also willing to listen and see where the commonalities are. And he did the upload, I think it was yesterday, and he even mentioned in there you have a similar type of effort going on. But understand that these women that are coming in, non-ADOS women coming in talking this crap, are to be discredited on that basis because they would not talk this way about their own men. And he played some clips to prove it. And it is very true. That is very true. Them women can complain about the Congo dandies all they want to. We know furthermucking well, Bantu women in general pay heavy attention to the clothing that a man wears before they will select him. These men could already be married, and their wives could talk about the clothes they don't have. So these men will spend money they don't have on clothes they can't afford. But then that means that something else has to be sacrificed. And we know that women don't like to make tough choices. And I'm going to be honest. Black women on the continent and in North America don't like making tough choices. I think black women on the continent can do so, but they don't like it. And I don't blame them for not liking it. But we know in the West, they pretty much say, I will not make any tough choices. In the West, they say, I will get what I want, or I'm going to pitch a furthermucking fit. End of story. So, they got their minds made up. They will make no tough choices. You will tell them nothing. You will withhold nothing from them. You will give to them whatever it is that they want as soon as they say they want it, or you're not a man. And they're not playing games. So with that being said, I'm going to tell y'all, it's going to do us some good to at least let people describe the situation so that we can understand the differences and similarities. Because oftentimes there is a pattern that will emerge, and I'll tell you what the pattern is. But in order to see it, you've got to at least listen, hear them out, and then, as long as they're willing to do the same thing, accurately, without embellishing, describe what you've experienced. The pattern that you will then see is that, generally speaking, it's the same issue, just further along with us. That's all. Because the issues and the pressures were aimed at us before others. That's all it is. And you will see that the same things were done. With Somalis living in the West, generally speaking, aid or government assistance in the form of welfare or some other name was offered to them. And they got more by not having a man around. And not only that, but the visas to get into these countries in the first place were denied the men and granted to the women and the children. And what wound up happening, because my friend told me this yesterday, was that a lot of the males wound up turning to drugs. And the women were upset because they didn't see stable families or stable couples. And then he said that there are a lot of Somali men who are born in the UK and they're still traditional. There are many that wind up in gangs and drugs, but there are also many that are very traditional. And he said that the Somali girls actually would rather those thugs than they would the traditional men, but they will complain about that. Does that sound familiar? That sounds familiar to me. Picking the wrong kind of guy because that's sexy, that gets the guts dripping, and then blaming the non-hybristophilic men for the outcomes. And saying that they're no good and they're crapping, talking down on them because they're failures, because of the stereotypes that they don't meet. You see? This is something we've heard about before, and he told me that it's happening. That's how he described it. I didn't tell him about this ADOS, non-ADOS divide, because he hasn't heard the acronym ADOS listening to Kevin Samuels. That's how he found out about red pill stuff. That's all. But I sat, listened, I learned, and I said, I got to tell my people about this. We just had one man from a UK Bengali community tell me what you all heard. And then we had my friend yesterday, with whom I did not tape the conversation because I didn't have his permission to do so, tell me something similar. The difference between them being that they come from two different ethnic communities in two different cities of the United Kingdom. That's all. The other thing, too, I want y'all to keep in mind is that one thing I learned from both of these men is that it is invalid to say to any Western man, you should have chosen better. It is not something you have a right to use as a crutch, or you have a right to use as a way to blame any Western man, because the women in the first gentleman's community are functioning as a sexual labor union. That means they're treating sex as labor when the man is a normal man. They function as a sexual labor union. They will not try to satisfy in the bedroom or in the kitchen their man. They don't want to do that. They're under pressure from each other to not do that. Now, this is the first gentleman in his community. This is going on. They're pretty much all on strike, not only with the punani, but also with the cooking. So that they'll have a situation in which the basic woman, or even below basic woman, can get an above basic man. The lowest lame can get the Superman. They can all punch above their weight class because they've all coordinated to do it. Even though it leaves a lot of them lonely, they still coordinated and agreed to do this. Now, you can't get women to just agree to do it for their own sake, because it's still going to leave a lot of them lonely. How do you trick them into doing it? By convincing them that they actually are better for no other reason than that they're women and their stuff is internal. That's how you get them to do it. Now, the friend of mine with whom I met last night told me there was the same thing happening there. Now, the friend with whom I met last night is in shape. Nice to look at. I mean, I wouldn't marry him, obviously, but by women's standards, he's nice to look at, and he's tall. And he's earning a nice living, especially for a single man where we live. And this man told me he can't even marry from his own community. He can't go back to the home country because they'll only marry him because his passport is from the UK. And they're going to marry him to go to the UK. He can't marry the ones already in the UK because they're polluted by feminism. But the other thing, too, was that in the UK where he lived, all of the women pretty much decided if they were anything to look at themselves, they wouldn't admit being interested in him. But when somebody finally was nice looking and was interested in him, finally, well, then they came out later on with all kind of other issues. They just threw some other issues, and I won't say what they were, but they just jumped out with all these other issues as if to compensate for the fact that they were nice looking, as if to say, well, I mean, look at me, look how nice I am to look at, and I was willing to marry you. You should have expected something like this. This is what we're dealing with. So this means that they have to function as such collectively, and we already know they don't like each other enough to cooperate like this, so they have to be mass convinced that automatically their value is so high and yours is so negative as a man, and for all of them to do this. They're all princesses. All of them are princesses. And you're either a peasant or a prince, even though in the first world, that is where you find the most men in the middle to begin with. And this is not just us. We're the ones on whom it was tried first. But we passed that stage in which we're the only ones facing this a long time ago. And I can tell you now, it doesn't happen overnight that a little 4-year-old girl watches some Disney movies and then the next day she's a 14-year-old entitled princess, and then she sneezes and wipes her nose, and by the time the tissue's dry, she's an 18-year-old raging feminist. It doesn't happen like that. You got to go from 4 to 5 to 6. That process is going to take years, a decade, 2 decades actually. So this means that in order for there to be an entire crop of young women that are all entitled like this, that it had to have started. And these friends of mine they're in their late 20s and early 30s. So this means that this had to have started about a generation ago in their own countries, not just in their countries, but in the specific ethnic communities from which they come in their country. Learn from other people. You can be pro-black and true to yourself while still learning from other groups of people and what they go through. Thanks for listening. Black Heart, Black Mind, Blackout, Assalamu Alaikum. Black, heterosexual, non-select male power just because they don't like it. And black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day.